everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a deep dive into something that's, it's kind of all around us, really. Beauty, yeah. So we've got a copy of Umberto Eco's History of Beauty here, and we are going to be kind of going through it and unpacking it and looking at beauty across the ages and across different cultures. And it's pretty fascinating stuff.
It really is. It's a really interesting exploration of how beauty has changed over time. Mm-hmm. And it shows us that, it's not just about, aesthetics.
Right.
It's a reflection of how people see the world.
Yeah.
And even, their place in it.
That's so interesting because I feel like today we have this very individualistic sense of beauty, like the whole beauty is in the eye of the beholder, that kind of thing. But I'm really curious to know, did ancient civilizations even have a concept of beauty?
Well, let's start with the ancient Greeks. Surprisingly, Homer, who, he basically wrote the book on ancient Greek culture.
Right.
It doesn't actually talk about beauty consciously. He describes beautiful bodies, sure.
Yeah.
But there's no real philosophical discussion of beauty in his works.
That's so interesting. So how do we get from the Greeks describing beautiful things to actually having a concept of beauty?
Well, I think that shift comes with the rise of Greek philosophy.
Yeah.
Particularly with Pythagoras and his followers. They started to connect beauty with mathematical proportions.
Yeah.
And harmony.
I always heard about the golden ratio. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So imagine a rectangle, right?
Yeah.
And the ratio of the long side of the short side is the same as the ratio of the sum of both sides to the long side.
Right.
So that ratio, 1.618, approximately, that's the golden ratio.
Right.
And the Greeks believe that this ratio was the key to beauty, and they saw it everywhere.
Yeah.
In the human body, in nature, and of course, in their art and architecture.
So it sounds like the Greeks were looking for a mathematical perfection in beauty.
In a way, yes. They even had a statue called the Canon, which was created by the sculptor Polykleitos, and it was meant to embody these ideal proportions.
Wow.
It was a blueprint for the perfect human form. But it's not as simple as just measuring and calculating.
What do you mean?
Well, the statue of Dionysus, the god of chaos, was actually found in the temple of Apollo. It was the god of harmony and reason.
Right.
It's they were acknowledging that beauty isn't just about perfect order. There's tension. There's this push and pull between harmony and chaos. And that's essential to the Greek concept of beauty.
That's such a fascinating point. It's you can't have light without shadow or order without a little bit of wildness. So even in ancient Greece, beauty wasn't this simple, straightforward idea.
Right.
So what happens as we kind of move into the Middle Ages?
Well, this is where Christianity really starts to have a major influence. Beauty in the Middle Ages is really connected to light. And light is seen as a symbol of God and divine knowledge. Thinkers like John Scotus Erigena, for example, they wrote about how light reveals the true nature of things, and how God is the ultimate source of all light.
That makes me think of stained glass windows in Gothic cathedrals.
Yeah.
They're just these explosions of color and light.
Exactly. And that wasn't an accident. Those windows were designed to evoke this sense of awe and wonder, to connect people to the divine through the beauty of light.
Yeah.
There's a great story about Abbot Sugar, who was so moved by the beauty of the light streaming through the windows of his newly built church that he actually wrote about it.
Wow.
And he described it as, this mystical experience, a way of getting closer to God.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's incredible to think about the power of those windows to evoke such a profound experience. But wasn't there also a more earthly side to beauty in the Middle Ages? I'm thinking about bright colors and precious gems.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, remember, this is a time when, social hierarchy was very rigid, and outward appearances play a major role in signaling your status, your wealth.
Yeah.
Bright colors and precious gems were expensive, difficult to obtain, so it became associated with power, nobility. I mean, imagine a world where the color of your clothing could literally determine your place in society.
Wow, yeah. So it wasn't just about personal preference. It was really about sending a clear message about who you were and where you stood.
Exactly.
Wow.
But it wasn't just about materials either. Colors also carried symbolic meanings that were deeply intertwined with, morality and religious beliefs.
Oh, interesting.
So, for example, blue. Blue was initially seen as kind of a drab color, kind of associated with negativity, but it eventually became associated with the Virgin Mary. And so it took on this more positive connotation.
Interesting. So what about red?
Red.
Yeah, red. I feel like red is such a powerful color. Like it has all these different meanings.
Exactly. Red could represent the blood of Christ.
Yeah.
The sacrifice of the martyrs. But it could also symbolize passion, power, even sin. Even green, which was praised by thinkers like Hugh of St. Victor as like the most beautiful color for its association with like springtime and rebirth. Wasn't always seen in a positive light. Like yellow, for example, was often associated with negative traits like cowardice, and it was even used to like mark social outcasts.
So we're already starting to see how ideas about beauty can be so shaped by, cultural attitudes and beliefs, and how something as simple as color, it can carry a lot of weight and meaning.
Yeah, it really can. And that's just the beginning. As we move into the Renaissance, we'll see these ideas, continuing to evolve and transform.
I can't wait. Well, for now, we're going to take a quick pause and we'll be back to explore the Renaissance and beyond. And we are back to the deep dive. We left off talking about, beauty in the Middle Ages. And now I'm really curious to explore what happens in the Renaissance. This period where there's all this like renewed interest in classical art and ideas.
Right.
So did the Renaissance like completely abandon the ideas about beauty that we saw in, ancient Greece and the Middle Ages? Or was there like some kind of continuity?
It's more like a blend, I think. I mean, the Renaissance, they did revive the classical Greek ideal, with its focus on proportion and harmony. But they also added their own unique spin on it.
So they weren't just copying the Greeks, they were like building on those ideas and adding their own like interpretations.
Yeah, exactly.
So like what were some of the key differences?
Well, a major shift, I think, was the introduction of grace as a quality that went beyond like mere physical measurements. Think of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. She's emerging from that giant scallop shell, and her posture's relaxed and effortless. There's this like gentle sway to her body. It's not just about her proportions, it's this kind of like captivating aura that surrounds her. This almost like ethereal quality.
It's like that je ne sais quoi, right?
Exactly.
That's something special.
Yeah. And Renaissance writers picked up on this too. As Agnello Firenzuola, for example, he wrote about this kind of effortless beauty, emphasizing natural charm over these like rigid formulas.
Oh, interesting. So it sounds like the Renaissance started to move away from strict rules and embrace like a more subjective view of beauty.
Definitely.
What about ideals of masculinity? Did they change as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, forget those slender, athletic Greek statues. The Renaissance embraced, powerful, even heavy-set figures as ideals of masculinity. Take a look at Piero della Francesca's portrait of Federico da Montefeltro. He was, this powerful military leader and the Duke of Urbino. And he's depicted as this like strong, imposing figure. It was about projecting an image of authority and power, both physically and intellectually.
It's amazing how these ideals of beauty can be so tied to like the social and cultural values of a time and place.
Yeah.
So we've seen this shift towards a more subjective understanding of beauty in the Renaissance. Did this trend continue as we move into like the Age's Enlightenment?
It amplified, definitely. During the Enlightenment, beauty becomes even more subjective, and the idea of manifold beauty takes center stage.
Manifold beauty.
Yeah, and this is where philosophers like David Hume and Immanuel Kant come into play. They argued that that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. They shifted the focus to individual perception and experience.
So no more universal rules or like one-size-fits-all beauty standards.
Well, not exactly. I mean, while individual preferences were acknowledged, there was still a big debate about like the nature of taste and how to cultivate it. Hume, for example, he believed that while everyone has their own taste, some people have a more refined, educated sense of beauty than others.
Okay, yeah.
And that's developed through, experience and exposure to art, literature, other cultural influences.
That makes sense. It's like saying anyone can enjoy music.
Right.
But like a trained musician can appreciate a symphony on a whole other level.
Exactly. And this debate about taste, it's crucial because it sets the stage for the Romantic era's fascination with the sublime.
Ah, the sublime. Now we're talking. So what was it about like crumbling ruins and stormy landscapes that so captivated the Romantics?
It was this shift, I think, from seeing beauty solely in terms of order and harmony to recognizing the power of like awe-inspiring, even terrifying experiences. Think about Caspar David Friedrich's painting Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog. You have this lone figure standing on a rocky precipice. He's enveloped in this mist, gazing out at this vast, mysterious landscape. And it evokes a sense of wonder, but also like a hint of danger and the unknown.
I can see how that would appeal to the romantics, with their emphasis on emotion and the power of nature. It's like they were seeking beauty in the untamed and the unpredictable.
Exactly. And it was Edmund Burke who really put this concept into words. He argued that the sublime evokes a delightful horror.
Delightful horror.
Yeah, this kind of paradoxical pleasure that comes from experiencing something vast, powerful, even dangerous, but at a safe distance, of course.
Oh, okay. It's like that thrill you get from watching a thunderstorm rage, but you're safe inside your home, right?
Exactly. A great analogy. And speaking of contrasting emotions, we can't forget the dandies and their very particular approach to beauty.
Ah, the dandies, those impeccably dressed, witty, and slightly aloof figures who kind of turn their lives into works of art.
That's the key idea. Life is art. Dandies like Beau Brummel, they weren't just concerned with their outward appearance. They cultivated this aesthetic sensibility that permeated every aspect of their existence.
Yeah.
From their perfectly tied cravats to their carefully chosen words, even their nonchalant demeanor.
I always think about that anecdote about Brummel asking his valet which of two lakes he preferred.
Yeah.
It's like it perfectly captures their ironic detachment and their desire for this aesthetic control over every detail of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea of aesthetic control was also reflected in the art and literature of the time. Think of Gustave Flaubert, for instance, the French novelist, known for his meticulous prose. And he believed that style is on its own an absolute way of seeing things. So for him, any subject could be made beautiful through the power of language and careful craftsmanship.
So it's like he was a sculptor of words, right?
Correct.
Chiseling away at his sentences until they reached the state of perfect beauty.
Right.
But, as we move into the late 19th and early 20th centuries, things start to get even more diverse, even a bit chaotic in the art world, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. We have the rise of Art Nouveau with its organic forms and sinuous lines. It was drawing inspiration from nature and emphasizing the beauty of functional design.
Oh, yeah. Think of those beautiful posters by Alphonse Mucha with their flowing hair and swirling lines.
Yeah.
Or the architecture of Antoni Gaudi, like the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, with its almost otherworldly forms inspired by organic shapes.
Exactly. But also running kind of parallel to Art Nouveau, we have Art Deco with its streamlined aesthetic and celebration of industrial beauty.
Like the Chrysler Building in New York City.
Yes.
A perfect example of Art Deco. It's sleek and modern with its geometric patterns and celebration of the machine age.
Precisely. And this fascination with machines and technology, it becomes a major theme in 20th century art. You have the futurists like Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, glorifying speed, technology, and the dynamism of modern life. But you also see artists grappling with the kind of darker side of industrialization, exploring the machine as an instrument of power and even torture, like in the works of Franz Kafka.
It's interesting how beauty becomes so intertwined with the anxieties and uncertainties of the modern world. On one hand, there's a celebration of progress and innovation, but on the other hand, there's this feel of the machine and its potential to dehumanize us.
Yeah, that's a great point. And this tension continues as we move into the postmodern era, and we see a real reevaluation of materials and a blurring of the boundaries between art and everyday life.
And this is where things get really wild, right? From the canvases of Lucio Fontana to the burlap sacks and burnt wood of Alberto Burri, it feels like the old rule book has been thrown out the window.
In a way, yes. Postmodern art challenges our very assumptions about what constitutes beauty. It embraces the unexpected, the imperfect, even the ugly. Artists like Robert Rauschenberg, they were incorporating everyday objects into their work, blurring those lines between high art and the mundane.
So are we saying that anything can be beautiful in the postmodern world? Where do we draw the line?
That's a great question. And it's one that, continues to be debated today. But one thing is clear, beauty has become much more fragmented and individualized in the postmodern era. There's no single answer, no universal standard.
Well, this has been quite a whirlwind tour through the history of beauty. We've covered a lot of ground from ancient Greece to the postmodern era, and it's amazing to see how these ideas about beauty have shifted and evolved over time. But what does all of this mean for us, the viewers, how do we make sense of beauty in a world where there are so many different and sometimes conflicting perspectives?
Yeah, it's almost like beauty has become democratized, hasn't it? I mean, like with the rise of mass media, we're just constantly bombarded with all these images, all these messages about like what's considered beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a far cry from, those ancient Greek ideals that we were talking about earlier.
It is. It really is. And you're right. The mass media age has really created a space where, diverse and often contrasting ideals of beauty coexist.
Right.
Think about it. In the early 20th century, you had the classic Hollywood glamour of like a Rita Hayworth,
right.
Epitomizing this certain kind of like feminine beauty.
But then you also had the androgynous chic of a Coco Chanel, who challenged like traditional notions of beauty with her sleek designs and her independent spirit.
Right.
And both were considered icons.
Right.
But they represented like very different ideals.
Yeah. It's almost like the old rules no longer apply. And we're kind of left to, navigate this vast landscape of beauty like on our own.
Right.
So how do we even begin to define beauty in a world where like there's no single right answer?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? And it's what makes exploring, the history of beauty so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just about like looking at pretty pictures or admiring sculptures.
Yeah.
It's about, understanding how our perception of the world and ourselves has evolved over time.
It's almost like we're holding up a mirror to history, but instead of seeing our physical reflection, we're seeing a reflection of like our values, our beliefs, our desires.
Exactly. And if beauty is truly this subjective and constantly evolving force, it raises like a really important question for all of us.
Oh, what's that?
If beauty is no longer tied to like fixed rules or universal standards, how do we navigate this ever-shifting landscape of aesthetics?
Right.
How do we form our own judgments about beauty without falling prey to like fleeting trends or societal pressures?
That's such a good question.
What makes something beautiful to you?
Yeah, those are some really thought-provoking questions, and I think those are perfect questions for our listener to ponder. After all, this deep dive wasn't about giving you all the answers. It was really about sparking your curiosity and encouraging you to explore the world of beauty with fresh eyes and to question some of those assumptions that we often take for granted.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Beauty is a journey.
It's not a destination. It's about being open to new experiences, challenging your preconceptions and finding what resonates with you, on a personal level.
So to our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering the beauty that speaks to you wherever you find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's it for this deep dive into the history of beauty. Thanks for joining us.